What's going on, guys? Tyler here with Grey Cat Tactical. If this is the first time you're seeing me on video, welcome. Thanks for stopping by. Really quickly, I want to get into my background. It might actually be relevant for this video. So, I'm not law enforcement, not military, I have no sort of combat experience at all. But I have been carrying a gun concealed for the past 4 years. I would say the majority of that time, like 90+% of that time, I've been carrying Appendix. But other than all that stuff, I'm just a normal guy. I like shooting, I like building guns, I like gear, I'm into fitness, that sort of thing. But nobody's special. I'm by no means the best shooter, I'm by no means the fastest. But in the past 4 years, I have tried my best to learn to become more proficient at this skill, and I've made a lot of mistakes along the way. I've learned as much as I can online, and I've tried just about everything. And my hope with this video is that by sharing with you what I think is the path to a proper draw, maybe you can avoid making some of the same mistakes that I wasted so much of my time on. So in order for us to even have this discussion, we need to figure out a definition for what exactly we mean by a quote-unquote good draw. I'll preface this by saying that I understand there's going to be a time and place for you to slow down, for you to be discreet with your draw. But on the flip side of that, if your 100% speed is extremely fast, it's always going to be a possibility for you to throttle back and go slower if you need to, and that's going to be fairly easy. But if your 100% speed is relatively slow and the situation arises where you need to go faster, you can't just throttle up to 150% of your max. That's not possible. So this in mind, our criteria for a good draw are going to be that 1, you get a consistent grip on your firearm, 2, you reliably get your gun out on target, and 3, you get your first shot on target very quickly. Now, an important distinction there is that we're not just talking about getting your gun out as quickly as possible, we're talking about getting that first shot to hit the target as quickly as possible. And we're going to say that this applies at a distance of, let's say, just arbitrarily 3+ yards. I would say that as something or someone gets close enough to you, there's going to be a point, it might be 3 yards, it might be more or less, but there's going to be a point where you'd be better off using your hands or running to create space so you could better utilize your weapon. And another option would be shooting from retention, but that's not something we're going to talk about in this video. We're specifically talking about drawing from concealment and getting a first aimed shot on target. The first step in a good draw is going to be clearing your cover garment. So in this case, it's a t-shirt. As a general rule, some people will say that if you are wearing 2 layers, so if I were wearing a jacket over the top of this, you might tuck your intermediate layer behind your weapon, so there's only ever going to be 1 layer covering your weapon. Now, I don't do this partly because where I live it doesn't really get that cold where I'm going to be wearing jackets a lot, and a lot of times when I'm wearing a jacket I'm going to be taking that jacket off at some point, so I don't want to have to worry about reaching underneath my jacket, untucking, and then doing that whole thing. But this is probably good advice for those of you who live in colder climates where if you have layers and layers and layers on, you might want to tuck your inner layers behind the gun so you can get easier access. But I will also say that the method I'm going to talk about here would apply whether or not you have your intermediate layers tucked behind your gun. You could grab 1 layer or you could grab all layers at the same time if you wanted to. So the first mistake that I made when I was learning is trying to swipe at my cover garment. So what that would look like is I'm just going to take my hand and kind of sweep up this way and hope that my fingers hook underneath my shirt. Now, this could actually work well if you have like fairly heavy or baggy clothes where you consistently get your finger underneath and you rip up. That's fine. But for me, I tend to wear my clothes fairly well fitted. Like this shirt is a little bit tight, but most of my shirts fit like this or maybe a tiny bit bigger. The point is that I don't always have a bunch of extra fabric down here for me to hook underneath. So rather than swiping at it, and the biggest problem with that is the consistency. You might get your shirt, you might not. A more consistent method that for me is very reliable is grasping. So instead of swiping at my shirt, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab here and rip up. Step by step, what that's going to look like is I'm going to take my support hand and I'm going to, with an open hand, slap myself basically right dead center of my abs. So just above my gun, the top of my gun is right here. I'm going to hit myself right there, and with my hand open, make contact, and from that point, I'm going to make a fist, grabbing as much fabric as possible. From here, I'm going to, with that fist, hold that tight. I'm going to yank my fist up toward my chin to create clearance, and then from there, I get access to my gun. Now, if the situation allows it, if you feel like your balance can sustain this, you might even, as you rip up, lean slightly back. And that backward lean, all it's going to do is create a little bit of extra room for you to get your hand down between your weapon and your stomach. This is especially important for those of you guys who might have a little bit of a tactical belly. If you need that room, create that room. This does work, so you do the same thing, slap to my stomach, grasp. In this case, I'm grabbing both layers at the same time. I'll rip up, grab my firearm, go to work, right? So it still works if I have 2 layers on. Alternatively, if you're wearing layers and it's, a temperature that would allow for this, you just zip that first one down, and then what you'd have to do is clear this, then do the same thing, rip up, right? But if you had yourself all zipped up, multiple layers, you could still do the slap grasp method if you had to. The next step after you've created that clearance is going to be getting your grip on your gun. Really quickly, we're going to review some fundamentals of grip. For those of you who already know this stuff, go ahead and skip ahead. So our master grip, our strong hand, we want to get the web of our thumb and forefinger, that little bit of skin in here, we want to get that up as high into the back of the gun as we possibly can. So it's going to come high into that corner, this corner right here, high up into that corner, and that sort of grip is going to kind of force our middle finger up into the trigger guard as well. So we get this hand as high and forward into the gun as possible, and we're going to keep this thumb up out of the way so we have some space here. Now in this space, we have our thenar eminence. That's what this part of your thumb is called. That thenar eminence is going to come and fill in this empty space here. So that kind of meaty portion of my thumb is going to fill in that space. My thumb's going to come forward, up along the frame or slide, and then I'm going to wrap my support hand around my strong hand, kind of squeezing everything together, right? That's our grip. Just like we talked about, in order for us to get that high, strong grip, we want to jam the web of our hand kind of into that corner. You can kind of think of this shape, this V shape that's formed here, almost like a funnel. We want to funnel the webbing of our hand into that slot right there. And again, as long as you get that high there, it's pretty much impossible for your fingers to go anywhere else than up into the trigger guard. Now, some people teach what they call the claw method, where they're going to go up over the top and they're going to keep their thumb up here on the back of their slide until they clear their holster. I get why they do that, to keep it out of the way and make sure they get their fingers set, but that does create a problem where after you draw, you're here, and you're going to at some point have to wrap that thumb around the back of the slide. Now maybe this is a me thing because I have kind of big ass hands. My thumb does tend to get caught on the back of that slide if I'm doing that. So I prefer just to make sure I jam myself up into that corner and I keep it there, and I keep my thumb up out of the way rather than here. As long as I keep it up out of the way, I'm gonna have space for my support hand to come in as well. So just kind of talking through this, step 1 is gonna be clearing your garment. Step 2 is gonna be getting your grip. Step 3 is gonna be the presentation and marriage of your hands. So we are going to get the gun out of the holster. We're going to start to present and put our hands together on the gun. Now, how you do this and what order these events go in kind of depends on the situation. We're going to kind of make the assumption that you have the amount of space and time that you would need for a full presentation, so fully punched out, and that you do in fact need a sight picture to take this shot. The way this is going to go is that as soon as you grab that gun, you get that good grip, you're going to pull it out of the holster, and as soon as it's clear of the holster, that muzzle is going to start moving away from your body, and it's going to start leveling toward the ground. So as you clear the holster, and as that gun moves away from you, you're going to get it level to the ground. And right around stomach or chest height is where you're going to bring that support hand in. I like to cue this as me reaching this first segment of my index finger right there. I'm going to jam that up into the bottom of my trigger guard. And then again, like we said before, that thenar eminence is going to reach into the gun. So I'm going to put the meat of my thumb into the side of the gun where I have that gap. Fill that space. And that's how I'm going to create that marriage of my hands to the gun. So again, clear, grip, we're going to start, as we clear the holster, we're going to start leveling that muzzle. Hands will marry together. My forefinger is going to smash into the bottom of that trigger guard. The unarmed eminence is going to fill that void. I'm going to press out as I finish that marriage. This fourth step kind of gets mixed into the third a little bit, but basically what's going to happen is as we get to a certain point, once we've married our hands together, you know, about chest level and that muzzle is more or less level, from here our next tasks are going to be 1, prepping your trigger, and 2, finding your sight picture. Essentially from this point out to full presentation, we want to do 2 things at once. We want to find our sights and we want to have that trigger prepped so that it's ready to go. So as soon as we find our acceptable sight picture, we can break that shot. Take a look at this real quick. Most triggers on most of the guns you guys are going to carry are probably going to be something like this, a striker fire mechanism. So we have some amount of travel that gets us to a wall. Once we get to that wall, we apply a little more pressure, it will break, that shot will go off, the slide will cycle, it will reset, go again. Right? But for every first shot at least, we need to go through that pre-travel and get to that wall. That's our trigger prep, so that by the time, if we have that trigger prepped at that wall, by the time we find our sights, all we have to do then is just break through that wall. A lot of people make the mistake of doing this the opposite way around, where they're going to present, they're going to find their sights after full presentation, and then their last step is going to be prepping and breaking that trigger. The problem with this is, for one thing, it's slower, but also you end up having to find your sights twice. You're going to present, find your sights, prep your trigger, find your sights again, and then break. So you're adding extra steps that you don't need to. Whereas instead, what I'm suggesting that you do is, as soon as your hands are together, you're going to start prepping that trigger. So get to the wall when you're about here, then you're going to finish your presentation, find your sights, and as soon as you're there, you break. Putting these pieces together, we are going to clear our garment, set our master grip. We're going to present that gun and marry our hands together. As we marry our hands, we are going to start prepping our trigger, extending out, looking for our sights, and as soon as we get that acceptable sight picture, we break that shot. I know this is going to sound funny because I just broke this down into a series of steps, but this is only for the sake of explanation and for understanding. As you practice this and you build up some reps, what I want you to try to do is make this whole thing feel like one motion. And as you go through the motion, I want you to get the thought in your mind that you're going to go as fast as you can, wherever you can, and you'll slow down where you need to. So no matter what the shot distance is, no matter what the situation is, you can go fast getting that gun out. And if you need to slow down in that presentation to find your sights properly, go ahead and do that. You can move it a little bit slower. A lot of times you're going to see really fast accomplished shooters. They'll move real fast until they get about here and they'll start slowing down as they finish that presentation, because what they're doing is they're looking for that precise sight picture if it's a lower percentage shot. A lot of times what you'll see newer shooters do is at long distances or a lower percentage shot, you know, a real small target, they're going to do everything slowly. So let's say I'm at 80 yards. Why would you be at 80 yards making a pistol shot? I don't know. But let's say I'm at 80 yards. I might do something like this and then break, right? When in reality, for that 80-yard shot, I could do everything else fast and take my time here. And if you can go faster at the start of that, you can save yourself a lot of time. So the total time from your stimulus, whether that's your beep or your threat, to your first shot, your first accurate shot, we can shorten that down a little bit. Just as much as I'm telling you that you should go fast where you can, I do really mean only go fast where you can, because for one thing, if you're compromising safety for the sake of speed and you end up harming yourself or somebody else that you don't mean to, that's game over, right? There's nothing that's worth that compromise. But on the other hand, if you are going so fast that you can't find your sights, that you can't make an accurate shot and you miss that first shot, that also does you no good. So again, you go as fast as you can while still making that first shot accurate. I will say that, especially because ammo is so expensive right now, most of the things that you need to do to get good at your concealed carry draw can be done at home. You can dry fire, right? Some of this needs to be validated in live fire because realistically, you're going to be a little bit slower, and that's going to give you the most honest answer as to whether or not you actually had your sights on target when you broke that shot. So when it comes to actually practicing this, what I'd recommend that you do, get yourself something like this. I'll put a link down in the description below where you can find a website to print out targets like this on an 8.5 by 11 printer paper. And basically, print out a target, or you can use a light switch or whatever you want, spot on your wall. But have a target of some sort where you can actually be aiming at something. So you want to make sure that you are actually training accuracy while you're doing this. The other component is going to be time pressure. You do want to actually be able to quantify whether or not or how much faster you are getting over time. I have a shot timer. I'm going to use this. If you don't have a shot timer, there are plenty of apps on both App Store and Google Play Store if you want to go that route. All you really need is something that you can have a random delay, and you can have a beep, and then you have another beep at a set interval. But we have a random delay. Minimum time to first beep is going to be 2 seconds. Maximum time is going to be 4 seconds. So between 2 and 4 seconds from the time I click this button, I'm going to get that first beep. That's my quote-unquote threat. And then I can set my par time. In this case, I set it at 1 second. So that means that the time from that first beep to the second beep is going to be 1 second. So the way I would practice this, I'm going to set up my timer. I'm going to stand as normal as I can. I know that when I film this, I'm sure people are going to call me out for standing a certain way, but I'm going to stand as normal as I possibly can. I'm going to click my timer, and then on that beep, draw, present, fire. And the goal is going to be to get my first shot off before that beep, right? You do have to be quite disciplined and very honest if you're going to do this effectively. You want to make sure that when you call that shot, when you actually break that trigger, you know for sure where your sight was. If you do this and practice enough and you're honest with yourself, you should be able to tell if you quote-unquote missed that shot, right? If you broke that trigger, you felt it break after your sights left that target and moved off the target, then you know you missed. If that sight stayed where it was as you broke the trigger, you know you hit. But you do want to be honest with yourself, and you always want to set a reasonable par time. So, there's no sense in setting a 0.5 par time if you're not going to make that time at all. We want to make sure we set a reasonable par time that we can always come within, and then we will take that down as we improve our skill and we get faster. If you've made it to the end of this video, first of all, I want to say thank you. I appreciate your time. And if you want to support the channel, I just want to say that I don't make a living from this very clearly. I have 500 subscribers and I'm not monetized, but I just do this for fun on the side. If you're interested in supporting me and making sure that I have time to do something like this so I can make more content, my main business is essentially teaching people, coaching people in the nutrition and training online. So if that makes no sense and you're not at all interested, totally fine. If you're interested at all though, you can check out my main channel. I'll put a link down below, or you can check out my website where I talk a little bit about the services that I offer, how that works. You can also see what people have had to say about their time working with me. So links down below. If you care to hear this, I think that a lot of people in this space, this kind of gun YouTuber space, we talk a lot about self-defense and preparedness and having all of our gear and our guns and our trucks and our toys and whatever. But if you really care about preparedness, you really care about being able to take care of yourself, and you ignore your physical health and fitness, then you don't actually care about preparedness. What you care about is buying yourself toys, and there's nothing wrong with that. At the end of the day, a lot of us are just giant boys who never really grew up. Our toys just got louder and more expensive. But if you're serious about improving your health, improving your fitness, maybe you want to be more jacked, maybe you want to be stronger, faster, you want to be able to run longer distances, whatever the case is. I've done this job now professionally for 8 years. I'm extremely confident that I can help almost anyone out there. And for whatever it's worth, if we end up having our initial conversation and we decide that it's not a good fit for either of us, that's totally fine too. I'd be happy to meet you and at least give you some sense of direction with your fitness journey, wherever that takes you. Anyway, for real now, that's all I've got for this video. I'm going to cut myself off, and I will see you guys next time.